sort of play on words there. So right, here we go. And let's go to where we were. Got it. Right. So for just introducing what we've been doing for, I think about how long we've been doing this, the line thing. I think we've been doing it for 6 months. So basically, everything in the eyes of the archaeologist Tim Ingold is followed by what's known as the line, right? And he's actually published a book called Lines, right? And in many ways, the idea of the line can be anything. That's a line. A line doesn't need to be straight. A wheel is a line that recycles itself. Layers in the ideas of Tim Ingold, for example, there's no real such thing as layers of archaeology. In fact, within archaeology, everything's mixed up, everything's moved around, and we follow the line throughout history. And the idea of the line is multifaceted because everything's interlinked. Everything goes on a journey. What we've given this planet is part of the line, is part of the journey. So this is the concept of what Tim Ingold. He spent years lecturing about the line and what we feel. Everything sort of is imbued in the line. It's like the World Wide Web. Everything's connected, right? And within archaeology, everything is connected. For example, if we want to give this principle here, let's just think of I don't know, a humble Roman coin, whatever, a humble Roman coin. That Roman coin, the journey of that Roman coin, it's been mined from somewhere. It's a gold Roman coin, so we got a mine. And then that may have been something else. It may have been some jewelry. And then it becomes a coin. That coin is then found in the earth. That coin is then taken out the earth and traded by an antique dealer. What we've missed out here is what has happened to that coin. Where was it traded? How did it end up in the ground? How did it end up getting found? And then it ends up in a museum and then it's handled. That is in essence following the idea of line, the movement in whatever direction. This is what the idea of the line is about. It's all about movement. It's all about sort of the sense of the beginning and also coming back to the beginning from the end, right? It's a recycling that movement. And also, if we want to do the principle that's something that I really enshrine my archaeology by, is the real idea that the past is a concept that we're disconnected to from distance, not necessarily time traveled, right? The past is a distant world. It is a distant moment in time. And in that past, as a metaphor, you might, for example, find a postcard. And that postcard might tell you what's happened in the past. And there might be an artifact associated with that postcard, which is imbued with the idea of the stamp. That postcard from, say, Australia ends up in Great Britain. And we then can tell the story of what's going on in Australia through that postcard. And that is a metaphor for how we see the past, because the past is thus a postcard of information that is enshrined and imbued within the sense of the line and the journey, the distance. And then if you want to use the word time, go ahead. Everything's interlinked with the moment and the momentual sense of the idea of travel. So if we do that there, what I'd like to do now is I would like to go there, and I would like to go there, and I'd like to stop sharing. And what we are going to do, we will naturally look at we will look at sort of any questions and whatever. But today, what I'd like to do is I would like to look at where we see the line going in regards to, for example, the Inca civilization. And when we think about the Inca civilization, we did look at the Inca civilization last week, but for some strange reason, I didn't get far with it. And we didn't actually look at the Inca civilization per se. We didn't look at Kayamako. We didn't look at Pizarro. We weren't not really interested in any of that, right? That's the archaeology and history side of things. What we are doing is the line in the sense of their network, their architectural road network. The way that they would produce steps, which would be up a sharp valley, which would go 100 meters up, cut out of solid rock. That's following the line, going up, going down, going there, but it's all interconnected, sort of embodied and emboldened in the rock, which is the story. So that could take the traffic of people, animals, water. It's full of mud. There's mudslides and all the rest of it. So we see this idea of the Inca world very much into where we really solely wish to be in regards to sort of following this idea of the line. Now, I've got some nice little notes here, and I wanted to maybe introduce a little story, and the little story is about Vilcabamba and following the lines, following the trackways and the roads to Vilcabamba. And I think that's where we should go first. I was going to do that second, but we're going to go first, and we're just going to see where we are with it. So here we go. Let's just go there, and we do this, and we are going to do a nice little bit of sharing. So let's go see if I can go directly to my screen. Hopefully it will go there, and lots of tabs open. Vilcabamba. Now, what we have been doing with Archaeology Company very recently, and Jessica was following quite closely as well. What we have been doing with the Tuesday and the Thursday classes is basically looking at the Mesolithic period from a refreshed set of eyes, because we've looked at the Mesolithic period before in our other classes, but we've been looking at another renewed, fresh set of eyes. And lots of the areas that we've been doing on the Wednesday are just looking at the past with new eyes. And, you know, we follow the past from a different perspective and a different angle. It's like a curveball. And obviously, where you do find curveballs, those curveballs themselves have a habit of uncovering new information. And thinking again, as we've been doing, the idea of a circle being a line, right? Because it's an endless line. It's a repetitory line. And you know what? If you rolled, you'll see the point now. If you roll a tire across a landscape in a straight line, you're creating a line, movement forward. So that wheel is always recycling the line, and you keep going on that line. You're following the line. You keep going. Yeah. So I have done this before. I have done Vilcabamba before, but as the idea of uncovering Vilcabamba, we see Harold Bingham there, and Peru's last Inca city reveals its secrets. It's genuinely a marvel. And in the ideas of Bruegel's Harvester, we think of the past and the moment in time as being a true marvel. The idea that the past has a beginning and an end, as a scientific archaeologist, is a good point. But as an archaeologist that looks at a post-processionalist way, enlarging on science and the sense of humanity, the past is always ongoing, right? It's always like a stage that you interpret. Now, what I've done very recently in my own teaching, and I'm talking about the Tuesday evening now, but this is linked with what we're doing now, I've basically said, look, dates are not important. Dates are really not important because many things in the past are undoubtedly set and already performed to lead to the next act. So the best way of looking at this, the Second World War did not begin on the 1st of September 1939. It was ongoing in the Far East since the 1937, right? It just melded into the Second World War for the Japanese and the Chinese. We see what was going on with Stalin and his own people. That was already being performed. What was going on Adolf Hitler and his own people. There was the war with the Italians and the Ethiopians. So when we see the date of the 1st of September, that wasn't really the beginning of the Second World War at all. It had already started. It was already being played out. The act of the First World War, Second World War, was already happening, right? And when, for example, we look at this is the greatest example of trying to say and put across what I'm looking at. When we think about everything intermingled within that sense of the line and that perspective, with everything talking and speaking within that great vast landscape that is enticed with the idea of history and the heritage. You look at AD 43, summer AD 43, the Romans invaded, suddenly we became Roman and it was Roman era. Nice. However, the Romans had already been trading with us for 100 years. Roman settlers were already here. Roman roads were, the idea of Roman roads were being constructed, but roads had already existed in Britain for thousands of years anyway. Burials of traders from the Roman Empire being buried over here. Roman villas being constructed, all before AD 43. So even though the date AD 43 is useful as a division within time, it's not necessarily the beginning of anything. It's in many ways, you need to have boundaries. You need to have the terminus, the beginning of something, and you need to have the end of something, right? The terminals, right? But there's always an overlap, whatever way you look at it, there's always an overlap. Even the soil and artifacts found in, and that soil is on the artifacts that you're looking at, right? There is a sense that the artifact is modeled by whatever was there before. And when you look at history and you look at maps and you look at plans and you look at plans of churches, you look at church plans and they say, oh, by the way, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and that happened over 1,000 years. No, it didn't. But it makes people find these things easier to read. But for me, it doesn't, because my mind is very different from what it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I see everything more, complicated, but very simple to read. If that makes any sense. Harold Bingham, there he is up there at Vilcabamba, the site of Vilcabamba. Peru's last Inca city reveals its secrets in its genuinely a marvel. Forgotten for centuries was cleared, and the latest findings, we see a museum being placed there. And Vilcabamba itself is one of those lost statements, of archaeology being found by following the line, by following trackways, by following steps. Did you know, for example, this cloud city, did you know, for example, there's roadways and trackways and steps going to places that nobody has ever followed in the Incan world, that has 25,000 miles of road network, right? You know, it's 25,000 miles of road network within the Incan Empire. Absolutely astronomical, absolutely amazing. Not 2.5 miles, 25,000 miles, right? In Britain, I do believe I'm right, but I'm probably wrong. In Britain, I think we've got 2.5 thousand miles of road in Britain, and they've got 25,000. So, you know, they've got roadways that they've got roadways that they simply don't know where they go. And Vilcabamba is one of those great mysteries that has been found by following the line, by following the steps, by following the roadway, by following the clues. Archaeology is a clue. So this itself is the last city of the Incan world. It's within those cloud forests and the swaying plank bridges that would have once existed. Edging along narrow paths beside sheer drops would lead you to Vilcabamba today, and in the past leading you to going through the undergrowth, clearing the undergrowth along these paths and steps to Vilcabamba. Vilcabamba today is a 4-day trek through the undergrowth with a matchet, and finding the walls of Vilcabamba was not an easy thing. You know what? They could have walked past Vilcabamba because it was so full of trees that you could easily miss it, even though it's a very, very big site with fallen lintels and building walls and stonework and even orange plaster. Imagine there are lots of buildings left to discover in the forest, and beyond in the mountain, who knows? This is a great thing. Following that great line, that sense of Harold Bingham, who was said to be the great discoverer of Machu Picchu, we see that the past is, and that is another thing as well, that the past can never ever be fully discovered, because the past is a secret within a secret. The past itself, quoting from Corinthians in the Bible, in my house there are many mansions, right? And it's very, very true. You open up one channel and you go down one pathway, and history gets very, very complicated. Do you know what? When I used to do building control work, and I used to be the archaeologist on some of these sites, it would be the developer would say, "There's nothing here, is there?" And I'd say, "Yeah, hopefully not, because if I find something, that's more paperwork." So I would hope that there would be nothing on these building control sites, because you find something that leads to more paperwork. And if you find something, you find a building. If you find a building, you do this, you do that, you do that, you do that, you do that. Even the idea of archaeology is within the line. So the sporing remains of Vilcabamba we see as being the last holdout of the Incan state. They resisted for decades the conquistadors of Pizarro that landed on the western coast of South America in 1532. Even though they executed the Emperor Atahualpa and occupied the Incan capital of Cusco that was full of gold, Vilcabamba was the holdout for the Incan world, and they did hold out for a very, very long time. And this city was completely lost. This was the city in the sky. This was a cloud city. This was the city of gold. This was the El Dorado. This was everything. But there are many more El Dorados to find out there if you follow the line. And I tell you what, right? One of the greatest regrets in life was not going to see these sites. I met somebody. She ended up getting pregnant, and I never ever went up to Machu Picchu, even though I had all the injections, and I would have visited Vilcabamba as well. But never got to do it. It's one of my great regrets in life. Roger, I know you're still young, Rog. Try to stay away from women because they don't let you to go places.
Okay.
So
Okay,
Vilcabamba itself being the last holdout of the Incas, it wasn't the end of the line for them. It was a continuous line because it needed to be rediscovered. The idea of the past is the sense of always being there, the sense of rediscovery. Even a complete destruction of the archaeological site is not the end of the archaeology. You cannot completely destroy or get rid of the archaeology. There's always going to be something there. Along the line, there is a postcard. There are some clues to some of the archaeological existence. Vilcabamba is there for all to see. It's in fact not far away from Machu Picchu at all. In fact, it's about 40 miles away from Machu Picchu. So I would have probably visited it. So again, when we look at the idea of this site, seeing the walls, seeing everything, and actually when we maybe what I'm not going to do next week is more Incas, but what we could do is think about Inca building. The buildings that we see at this site are slightly not Inca. We're starting to believe that let's just show you what I mean, and just sort of go start another one there. What we do here, we type in Inca stonework, right? I'm just going to make a point here. Inca stonework. Okay, right. Yeah. We all know that. We all know this, don't we? We've all seen this. We've all got an idea what's going on, right? Now, this has been accredited to the Inca, right? But we do actually believe that this was actually created by another civilization that the Inca may have taken over. That there on the left is Inca stonework. However, if we want to follow the line, these buildings were actually used by the Inca. They may not have built them, but they were used by the Inca. They've just, you know, they've just been given credit for what's going on here, right? This was all, you know, there and whatever in the Inca world. So what I'm getting at is that you see this being buildings within the Incan world, right? Great, we love it. The point to be made there is that when these fall into the Inca world, the Inca Empire, which probably only lasted about 40 years or so, the Inca took over another world and another state around roughly about 1450. And they came to in their great power by about 1480, and Pizarro ended up with the conquistadors in 1532. Getting all these dates out of my head. Even though the stonework isn't technically Inca, it's being used by the Inca, right? And they follow the line, and you can't get any more of the line than that, right? Very, very important. So what we then do, we go back to these images and we do this, because this is proper Inca work, right? Different from what we've just seen, but this is definitely Inca. This is the last of the Inca world. When we think of how we see these buildings, and eventually when they're discovered, it's almost as if you follow the trackway, and within a year, the plant growth has actually taken over the tracks again, and they've actually taken over the steps, right? And the point is, this is all part of the story. This is all part of the reveal, unreveal, reveal, unreveal. This is the point I was trying to make, because the point I was trying to make is that you've got the idea of following that passage of time. And what we do find with this wonderful site of Vilcabamba is that you could miss the buildings because it's so overgrown. And now they've started to clear some of the trees and some of the growth, right? But it wouldn't take long for the trees and the growth to come back. But again, that's all part of the story. If you think about Bruegel's Harvester, again, you think about all that sort of conversation going on under the tree. You think about the crops themselves. It's harvest time, being harvested. You think about the grain. You think about them sleeping there in the painting and harvester. And the idea of the mangroves, the idea of the growth, the idea of the archaeologist clearing away, taking photographs of the growth, taking over, clearing, and so on, so on. In other words, the Inca city is still alive, except without the Inca. However, some of the people actually helping the archaeologists are actually descended from the Inca anyway, so it's still an Incan city. Nice. Do you see where I used the line there? I kept the line going. So what we do find is that with some of these buildings, they've got multiple rooms, stairs, streets. And the one thing about Vilcabamba, look at that nice little bit of a fountain there. Yeah, natural. This is, when I say natural, it's in the natural sort of Inca work. The area is fascinating because it still hasn't been disturbed or looted. The information is first-hand. Now, that's really, really interesting. What does first-hand mean? The concept of first-hand is what you're seeing. It's like the stage, the performance on the stage. The stage is multifaceted. Our interpretation of what the play is about, the past, is actually part of the story, always part of the story. This itself is in the emboldened highlight of the star that shines at the end of the Incan Empire. But I've said throughout that the Incan world never ever went, because it's still with us, within these buildings, within the memory, within the echoes of the people that are still with us today, and what we can see and what we can't see, and uncovering and not covering, and so on. So Vilcabamba itself, it's the last capital of Inca resistance. It has history, it has archaeology, it has everything. It's genuinely a marvel to work in this place. And it was for those Inca to have been there in the first place. So the past is always an echo. When you go in the valley and you say, Oggy, 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 and you can still hear the echo going on. This is what the past is. It's an echo, but the echo doesn't need to be always the same. It's always about how that echo moves on, and it's got to keep moving. You fail within archaeology if you don't keep moving, right? You've always got to keep moving, right? For example, this week, on Tuesday, Roger was there. I said, I kept saying, look, we did some of the stuff that we're doing this week. I'm correcting myself from last week because I've had another class and we've taken this and we've put it in it. And the stage that we performed last week, we're honing in on the act that we're performing on Tuesday. And this, again, is where we're going. So what we can say is that the other thing as well is by looking at sites such as this, we not only follow the story, the continued story of the Incan world, it gives us a more venerating sky-like sun, engaging in the diplomacy of the world that still existed within the Inca, whilst the Spanish had taken over everything else. Interesting enough, the story about Vilcabamba is amazing. You've got them at war with the Spanish. You've got them seeking refuge against the backdrop of the Spanish. And facing an overwhelming invasion in 1572, the Incas set the city ablaze and fled into the forest. The Spanish captured Peru's last indigenous monarch, Tupac Amaru, and executed him in Cusco, bringing the Inca Empire to an end, or did it? This site overgrew, and it's likely the Spanish never ever got here. In many ways, the Incan Empire survived. It did. Within those people and within the memories and within the buildings and within the ideas the Inca left us. And I've got to be fair and I've got to be equal. When people say that the Roman Empire disappeared, they are wrong, because the legacy of the Roman Empire survived. Do you know, I came to that concept from a friend of mine called Karen in London. This was back in 2007. And we were speaking about the Romans one day. And Karen said, I went to a class about history and the Romans and so on. And she came out saying that the Roman Empire never left us. We left Rome. I put the last bit in there. We left Rome. She said, Roman Empire never left us. And I said, we left Rome. But Christianity is still with us today. So the Roman world is still with us. It's still breathing. And in many ways, the Incan Empire never came to an end, because this is still there. This still exists. And when we go on to a pseudo juncture there, we want to remind ourselves of what was happening in 1944. In Poland, for example, what the SS were trying to do is cover up their crimes by digging up the bodies of those people that they had shot and placed into the gas chambers. And they were putting the bodies onto a mound, hopefully erasing history, hopefully making sure that history never happened, right? But the line continued. They were caught out. We've got photographs. We know what was going on. So in other words, the story of those people who suffered their descendants are still there. They're still with us. They're still indigenous. And this is what we need to say with the Incan world. We follow that line. We follow the roadways. We follow the pathways. And just imagine we go into those woodlands. We go into the forests. Again, difference between woodland and forest, deciduous, coniferous. And we go into that landscape and we can still follow the line of the Incan world because it's not all been discovered. Can we ever end the Incan Empire? No, we can never do that. We can never ever end Rome in Britain unless we demolish all the churches, get rid of every single Christian, and get rid of every single evidence and everyone carrying a cross. So what we see with this type of these trees and the Matapalo trees, which dominate this landscape, we see that this site is massively important, and we can't forget that again, this is all about following the line, and this thing that they said you have to walk for 5 days along an Incan road to get to this site. And the experience of getting to this site is unbelievably amazing. And actually, it's not going along just an Incan road. It's going up steps and stairwells and just getting the idea and also going along. And the other thing as well is you're rediscovering this every single time. Looking at the past is a sense of rediscovery, a fresh look at the past. When archaeologists dig things out of the ground, it's only the beginning of the story. 90% of archaeology is not done in archaeological excavation. 90% of archaeology is everything else. This is archaeology that we're doing today, following the line, following that sense, and actually also using all that technology that we understand against the traditional backdrop of archaeology, giving us an idea to the Incan pathway. Do you know what they're archaeologists are currently mapping the Incan paths to avoid any damage from a highway that is being created throughout this landscape. But then again, an Incan road, an Incan highway that is going across this landscape, a modern road, I call it an Incan highway, is within the tradition of the Incan world. The Incans were great road builders, and that's what we cannot forget. What we need to do now, there's my little, just have a little look at some images of Vilcabamba. And look at that there. We got an idea of these little niches, these little windows. And you know what? These little niches are actually for relatives. The Mambos, this area here, the Tambos. These, what you would do, you'd have a building like this, and you would take your relatives around with you. I know that looks small. Basically, when a relative gets emaciated and desiccated, the body shrinks, and you can mummify them, and you could sort of have them in a crouch position, and you could carry them around with you and could put them in the niches. This is what they are for. Again, that echoes the sense of the story, the ever-ending, never-ending, never-ending story. And again, well, hang on, here we go. We love this. Just a little map. That there, Espiritu Pampa, is actually Vilcabamba. Hang on, Espiritu Pampa. Yeah, that's the. Hang on, got this wrong. There's Vilcabamba there. Espiritu Papa is the new Vilcabamba, and there's Vilcabamba that we've just been talking about, which is the old Vilcabamba. I'm glad I remembered that bit. Gets very confusing. New Vilcabamba, Espiritu Papa, and the Vilcabamba there, which is the old Vilcabamba, which is the one we've actually been talking about. But if you have a look there, you can see how close Machu Picchu is in regards to Vilcabamba, 40 miles away. And look at all these little trackways going in between, sort of linking everything, yeah, and sort of going along these trackways. And most of these trackways on this nice little old plan are all associated with original constructions throughout the Inca world. So linking everything together. So many trackways that go, and we don't know where they're going. It's just out there. It's out there to be discovered. And again, going back to this image again, there is Harold Bingham. So what I'd like to do now is I'm painfully aware of time. We've got about 15 minutes now. And what I wanted to do was, we've led from these trackways and these roads to Vilcabamba. So what we need to do, we need to think of some other localities. So if we do that there, and we do that there, and we close that there, and we close that there, we got that there, good. So there we go, the manager of the Royal Roads. Now, if I said to you, what are the roads that you know about in history, you would immediately say Roman roads. And one of the things that I intimated last week, but I really didn't spit it out, because people associate me with the study of the Roman Empire, but I'm jack of all trades when it comes to areas of archaeology. I thoroughly loved the Paleolithic period. I wanted to do more, but then I realized, we needed to get from the Paleolithic into the Mesolithic. So again, I would say that the 25,000 miles of road created by the Inca is a greater achievement than what the Romans did. Let's just think about that statement. Let's just think about that statement. The Incan Empire lasted a very short period of time. But the Incan Empire had taken over earlier worlds. But the idea of establishing a road network throughout this new world for South America was a developing new nuance, right? It was what the Inca should be known for. And I feel it's wrong that the Romans should be known for their straight roads. They were good for building, they were good in places for building roads, but in Britain, the Romans were absolutely rubbish at building roads here, right? But wherever the Inca built their roads, trackways, steps, they were extraordinarily brilliant. The Romans had, from 753 BC all the way through to when the Roman world ended in 476, to build road networks everywhere. But they were very, very poor. But the road networks that still exist from the Inca, which is widely many, most of the 25,000 mile of roads within the Incan world is actually still there. They still exist. Whereas most Roman roads just didn't last. They were absolute pants. I know Roman roads have got a longer into time the Inca roads. They were being constructed, 2,000 years ago, the Alpine Way going into Rome and so on. Even then, the Inca roads, even though the Roman roads are going to be 2,000 years old, most of them, and the Inca roads are only going to be 500 years old, the Inca roads are still in a massive state of preservation, where most Roman roads don't exist. Or they just exist as lineways through fields, but these exist as solid blocks of stone created, even wallways to carry roads, and even sort of banking across sort of walls across cuttings to actually put roads. So the construction of the road for the Inca was an incredible feat. And what would have been next for the Inca? We don't know, because their empire proper lasted a very short period of time. Manager of the Royal Roads, amazing. Somebody, there you go. There is somebody eking out there where we're going to stick the road next. Obviously, some modern roads follow the old Inca roads. And we're thinking this as well. Look at that there. Well, so what we've got this pathway here leading, right, with an embankment to support the road, right? And then you've got these rope bridges. And then you'd go onto this side over to another roadway that exists. So the Inca had these rope bridges, but these are all part of the road network over these sort of gorges and chasms. However, there you go. what we do see is that where you get shallow valleys, instead of building the to the Inca, the linear lintel and a span was to be done with the straight line rather than a curve. But it's not to say that they weren't aware of the curve, because they certainly were, in many ways more than one, but that's another lecture altogether. But you can see there what they've done. They said, all right, what we'll do, there's only a shallow little bit of a stream at the bottom. We'll build a little bit of a culvert, and we'll just sort of build this up, and we'll have wooden beams supporting it, and we'll go across the top, and then you've got the road steps, job done. That's part of the road network. So, you know, the network was composed of formal roads, carefully planned, as we said last night, engineered, built, marked, and maintained, but paved in the main when necessary, or cut into solid rock. That's why they're still there today, because they're cut into solid rock. And many stairs to gain elevation. Now, we did actually discuss a few weeks ago about the idea of the wheel and the idea of the circle and that, and whether that was available to South American people. I argue that it was, but for this road network, it would have only been practical to use the wheel on where roads were relatively on the flat. If you need to transport back then, you're going to use the alpacas or llamas. So obviously, these are their bridges, and obviously you've got rope bridges, and we did see there these retaining walls. They're protecting the road, retaining walls. This is what they did. So again, I mentioned last week, can it be directly compared to the Roman Empire road network? No, because this is in a different world. Obviously, for people to get around this world, it's 12 million people from the Inca world trying to get around. It needed. And it was a way that the road network was essentially the way of connecting their empire, right? Their huge empire, an empire that stretched over 2 million square kilometers. And people would those tambos I mentioned earlier on. You saw a tambo within Vilcabamba, right, where you had all these niches. Well, these tambos were like way stations. They had these little hotels all the way along, and these could be done for sort of official messengers going across the empire, or they would be used to keep the shepherds who are looking after llamas, who are sort of moving great flocks of llamas around the, I was going to say the Roman Empire, the Inca Empire. So it's that sense of movement and redistribution of goods. This is what made the Incan Empire so successful, because of their road network. So what we think is in modern times, some remnants of the road do see heavy tourism. And it said that we've got to think that, you know, the extent of this road, and listen to this. This is a good point. There we go. Yeah, this is showing sort of conquistadors trying to get across an expanse where there had been an Incan road, and obviously the Incas must have cut the bridge. So this is a nice little bit of a blurb, right? A very nice bit of a blurb. So if we can get hang on, we'll come back to that image there. It's great, isn't it? Look at that! Wow, it just goes on. Look at that. Whew. Something really special. However, we'll come back to that in a second. And look at that there. Look at that there heading. You can see this is just one main principal roadway, right? This is all interlinked. So the Inca Coast Road there. Yeah, so you can see you've got 25,000 miles of road. These are just two of them. And if you go with the key there, so you've got 500 miles, 1,000 miles, you've got 1,500. So this one here, the one in red, That road is at least 2,000 miles long. That's one alone. This is going to be this other one along the coast is close to 2,000 as well. So you got within these two roads themselves an incredible, a huge, incredible achievement, massive achievement. And again, as I'm talking now, let's just think about this next quote is actually from somebody who was there on the ground in 1553, a Pedro Casar de Leon. Pedro Casar de Leon. And this is what he's writing in 1553. Let's just see what he says. Right. Remember, Pizarro was there in 1532, 1553, 30 years later, but the Incan emperor is still out there somewhere, right? As it never died, at Vilcabamba. Here we go. Peter, I believe that since the memory of people, it has not been read of such a greatness as this road. And this is a Spaniard writing this. It has not been read of such a greatness as this road, made through deep valleys and high peaks, snow-covered mountains, marshes of water, roads built across it, like this. Live rock and beside furious rivers. Live rock, cut into the live rock. In some parts of it was flat and paved, on the slopes well made, by the mountains cleared, by the rocks excavated, the rivers with walls, in the snows with steps and resting places. Everywhere it was clean, swept clear of debris, full of dwellings, warehouses for valuable goods, temples of the sun, relay stations that were on this road. And you just think about that and you think, that's a Spaniard. That's a Spaniard. Not a native, a Spaniard. He respected what he was seeing. In fact, in many ways, the road network that he was seeing was far better than any road network was back in Spain. Far, far greater than any road network in Spain. And there's some more facts I want to give you here. This is going to blow your mind, right? So what we've got the inner road there in green, and we've got the other one in black, right? These next things are going to blow our minds, right? And we're going to have to finish in a few moments. The exact extent of the road network is not known. Yes. Travelers and scholars propose various lengths spanning 25,000 miles. Some say that there might be up to 37,000 miles of road across the Incan Empire. 37,000 miles of road. We've mentioned the two main routes. And it says that the roads themselves stretched over grassland, undulating surfaces, and some of the roads, wait for it, are 4,000 miles above sea level. Just not miles, flipping heck. 4,000 miles, flipping heck. 4,000 meters above sea level. 4,000 meters. That's you know, that's when your ears pop, right? 4,000 meters above sea level. Amazing. And they go across deserts, coastal plains, foothills, all the rest of it, right? And it's, to be honest with you, in many ways, it's far better than some of the road networks that exist today. They're building this new highway, right? And it's interesting. How long will that highway last? You know, will it last a long, long time as this road network? Probably not. I just do a few more images and a little bit of a modern symbol relegated to telling us about this wonderful road network. And again, looking at that there, what you've got, not only have they put a road in, they've put a wall, a retaining wall, so that the road could be maintained. So you've got the road there, a retaining wall, so this can be maintained. Absolutely amazing, isn't it? It's truly amazing. The guys of what they're able to do. And again, roads going across like endless whatever. Look, it's just a road. It just keeps going. When I say just a road, it's more than just a road. Basically, this sort of indicates this is associated with one of the great cities at Pakakam, and you've got again along the coast. And this showing you that there was these two empires before the Inca, and obviously it was linking everything together. And there he is, the manager. Oh, there we go. The manager of the Inca bridges. They had people who were specific to make sure that the bridges were all good and maintained, and they were all standard. It was all standardized. And there is the manager of the Royal Roads. So what we're going to do, we're going to call that a day now. I just wanted to follow that line, and hopefully we've had a good little bit of the line today. And what we need to do now is I want to find out if there's any questions before we close today. Next week we're going to be on Thursday, and I will see you all on Thursday, and we will stop that now, and we will go there. Right. Anything you'd like to say, Anne? From different trading apps to find information. Hang on a minute. Should have gone wrong with my phone. Right, good. Right, okay, Anne. Anything you'd like to say?
Well, it's always good to know that there are lots of dimensions, you know, in the past. Really, there's the past. Yes. Then, if you go back, there's so many aspects of the past that we can still study.
Yes.
And that is a wonderful example, actually, the roads, because everybody talks about Roman roads, and they all think they're wonderful, you know. Everyone thinks they're wonderful, but, you know, that's because they don't know about the Incas or anyone else, you know. So that's always interesting. Thank you. I haven't got any questions, really.
No, that's okay, Anne. It's okay. It's fine. Okay. It's fine.
Thank you.
So onwards and upwards. And what about you, Roger? Roger Dodge?
No, it seems okay. It's quite a surprise, the extent of the empire. You said it went up to 1532. From when?
Right, now this is a thing. What we need to remember, obviously the empire lasted beyond 1570 too, but what we do see is obviously 1532 that the conquistadors got there and the Pizarro started taking everything away from them. Yeah. Actually, there were some Incan victories over this modern army that were coming in, a bit like Islandoana, the Zulus over the British in 1879. But what we do find is that the Incas were really starting to come into play by about 1450. They didn't really get big until about 1480. And obviously their world was really starting to fall apart by 1532. So it was a short-lived empire, but on the back of other little empires that had existed before, they just unified everybody, and you know, and basically, yeah.
Do we know anything about the language, Carl?
What we do, it's basically more or less following the modern dialects that have actually survived. But there was a lot of uniformity, so it was a bit like Latin. They would have liked most people to speak similar tongue. They were very much into that. And the other last thing to say on that question, Roger, if Pizarro hadn't have got there, it's quite likely that they would have come across some Chinese traders who would have offered them weapons and gunpowder, right? Yeah. And it wouldn't have taken it. You know, the Pizarro landed with only a small army to come up against the Incas, who could have been equally armed a couple of decades later, with weapons that were better than Pizarro. You know, the Inca would have been a match for them. But we do actually believe that the Pizarro deliberately spread diseases amongst these people, which wiped them off. And then when they were weak, they conquered the empire. Anyway, if there's anything else, Roger, saying now. If not, I'll go.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Pat, anything you'd like to say? Pat's going to say she's been there, but go on then.
Yes, I did go there. I always wanted to go there. No, it was excellent. I really liked looking at it again. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Right. Okay. And finally, Steve.
Thanks, Carl. It was really interesting. I'm quite intrigued by this idea that of the line and the idea that past reveals itself to us as postcards.
Say that again. The past reveals itself as what?
Postcards. So you see,
Yes.
just captures them. You get captures and moments, and you
Yes.
don't more than almost like a holiday snap.
Yeah, and this is what the past is. It's a holiday snap, and the thing is, right, the postcard itself also has to be interpreted, right? So it's the interpretation of the postcard, right? So the postcard is not necessarily all you see.
Yeah.
So some people, it's a bit like a Picasso, isn't it? What do you see? What do you see a bit of Picasso? Is it just like a bit of red with a little line through it, or does that represent something? I don't know. So yeah, the past is a postcard, but that's all we've got, and we know the past exists. We know it exists somewhere in some place, and that word sometime, but we can't get to it. And the postcard is what we've got. In other words, it's a bit like me, right? I'm one of the lucky ones that didn't have an injection. I've not been vaccinated, and I'm so pleased. But I won't for the next few years be able to go into Australia. So the point is, even if I got on a plane, I wouldn't be allowed into Australia. That's the concept. We don't have time travel, but the postcard is the best that we've got to time travel.
Okay.
Thank you. Is that quantum physics? Is it a bit of quantum physics there?
Well, it is, and I hopefully, if I can find some more time, I've got a book that is actually about time travel that I've been writing for quite some time.
Okay.
But it is extremely complicated.
It's certainly, interesting. Always, you have a new slant on things, which you've got to get our heads around.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Thanks.
So right, guys, this is our new class next Thursday, and it will be at 6 o'clock. Okay.
Okay, then, thanks, Carl. Yeah.
Okay.
You said 7. You said 7, but
no, it's
No,
6. No,
6.
sorry, it's 6 o'clock next Thursday.
Right.
6
So
o'clock.
are you
6
going to
o'clock.
do tomorrow morning?
Yeah, 10:30.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Many
see you
thanks,
all.
Anne. I'll see you
Bye.
next. I'll see you tomorrow morning, Anne.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
And Steve, hopefully I'll see you tomorrow morning. Roger, see you Tuesday, and Pat, I'll see you on another planet.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
See you all.
Take care, Pat, Roger, and Steve. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Anyway, thanks for watching. And if you're out there, Jess, we do miss you, and we'll all speak to you soon. Take care. Diolch yn fawr i chi. Gwelwch chi eto. And this is the end. That's what by the door. Try, guys.